Love in Every Word, Episode 1. In the heart of Ibadan, where the air smelled of roasted corn and the hum of danfos never truly faded, lived Grace. A quiet girl with too many thoughts and too few people to share them with. She worked at a printing shop along Dugby Road, typing up letters and filling out forms for people who couldn't write theirs. Every day, Grace watched strangers pour their hearts out in words she wasn't meant to own: apology letters, job applications, love notes, even breakups. But one particular day, a man walked in and changed the rhythm of her silence. His name was Daniel. He wore a simple shirt, his hands stained with engine grease from the mechanic workshop nearby. He walked in, hesitated, then said, "Please, I need help writing something important." Grace smiled politely. "What kind of letter?" Daniel scratched his neck. "A love letter. But not ordinary love. I want it to sound real. Like I mean every word." That caught her attention. Most men came asking her to make them sound like poets. Daniel wanted honesty. So she leaned forward. "Tell me about her." Daniel's voice softened. "Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher. She says I don't talk enough, that I keep my feelings buried. So I want to show her, even if I'm not good with words." Grace's fingers floated over the keyboard, but she looked up and said quietly, "Then let's make the words speak for you." And they did. Together, they crafted the letter one line at a time. He spoke. She translated his heart. "You're the peace in my noisy world. When you laugh, I forget the day's heat. Even silence with you feels full." When they were done, Daniel looked at the paper like it was gold. He said, "You make it sound like love is easy." Grace replied, "It's not easy, it's just honest." Days passed. Daniel kept coming back, sometimes for new letters, sometimes just to say thank you. He started showing up with bean cakes in brown paper or a bottle of Coke for her break. And one evening, when the orange sunset painted the sky above the city, Daniel brought her something different, not a letter to write, but one he had written himself. Grace opened it. It was short, a bit messy, but it made her heart stumble. "You taught me that love doesn't need big grammar, just the right person to listen. This time, I'm writing for you." Grace didn't say anything for a while. The shop was quiet except for the whir of the ceiling fan. She looked up at Daniel, blinking fast. "Daniel," she whispered, "you really did learn." He smiled. "You said love lives in every word. I just followed your lesson." From that day, their letters changed form, from helping others find love to writing their own story, one note, one glance, one word at a time. In a city that never stopped talking, Grace and Daniel found peace in their small, quiet language, the kind of love that lives in every word, and even in the spaces between them. Episode 2. Months passed, and Grace found herself smiling more often, sometimes at work, sometimes alone, sometimes for no reason at all. Every morning, Daniel would stop by before heading to the workshop, leaning on the shop's window frame like it was built just for him. Their friendship had grown into something soft and unspoken, the kind of love that didn't need confessions to exist. But unspoken things have a way of asking to be heard. One quiet afternoon, as the printer hummed and sunlight spilled through the blinds, Daniel walked in, looking different, not tired, but heavy. "Grace," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual warmth. She looked up. "What happened?" He sighed. "Sarah came to see me yesterday." Grace's fingers froze on the keyboard. She didn't move, didn't breathe. "Oh?" "She got a transfer to Abuja. She wanted to say goodbye, properly this time." Grace swallowed hard. "And you?" "I told her I'm happy for her," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But I realized something." "What?" "That I wasn't waiting for her anymore." Silence sat between them, not awkward, just full. Grace stared at him, her chest tightening in ways she didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to. He leaned forward slightly, eyes soft. You know, you've written so many love letters for other people. Maybe it's time someone wrote one for you." Her throat felt dry. "And who would that be?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe someone who's still learning to speak your language." Before she could respond, a customer walked in, breaking the moment like glass shattering. He stepped aside politely, gave her one last look, and left. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. The words she'd typed for others replayed in her mind, all those declarations, promises, apologies, but for the first time, she realized she'd never written one for herself. The next morning, she did. She took out a sheet of paper and began to type. "Dear Daniel, you walked into my life asking for the right words, but you left teaching me that sometimes silence is enough. You brought warmth into the corners of my world I didn't know were cold. I don't know what this is yet, but it feels real, and that's enough." She folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and wrote only his name on it. No address, no title, just Daniel. When he came by later that day, she handed it to him without saying a word. He looked confused at first, then opened it slowly. As his eyes moved down the page, his smile grew, that same quiet smile that once asked for help, expressing what words couldn't carry. He looked up at her, a little lost for speech. "So this is what love sounds like," he said softly. She met his gaze. "It sounds better when shared." Then, for the first time, he reached across the counter and held her hand. The hum of the city outside went on, loud, messy, alive. But in that tiny printing shop, time stood still. Two hearts, once tangled in other people's letters, finally found their own words. And just like that, love in every word became more than a title. It became their story, handwritten, unpolished, and entirely true. Episode 3. Grace stood before her classroom window, watching the rain fall in slow sheets against the dusty glass. Her voice, usually firm and patient, now trembled as she spoke to herself. "He said he'd come back," he promised. It had been 2 months since Daniel left Lagos for Abuja on a work project. 2 months of silence, 2 months of unanswered calls, and 2 months of sleepless nights, filled with questions that never stopped echoing in her heart. Grace sat alone at her desk that evening, the classroom empty, the sound of rain filling the air. She opened her journal, the one Daniel had gifted her on her birthday, its first page still carrying his handwriting. For Grace, whose heart holds 1,000 poems the world deserves to hear. She traced her fingers over the ink, her throat tightening. Daniel was the type of man who never forgot birthdays, who texted good morning before sunrise, who always ended calls with, "Remember, I love you," in every word. But lately, there were no words. Her phone buzzed, suddenly. A message. Her heart jumped. "Daniel?" Except it wasn't. It was a message from her friend Chidinma. "I just saw Daniel at Jabi Lake Mall. He wasn't alone." Grace froze. The message hit her chest like cold steel. Her first instinct was denial. "Maybe it's not him," she whispered. But deep down, she knew. Daniel had been pulling away for weeks. Fewer calls, colder replies, and the soft promise of, "I'll explain later." By the weekend, Grace couldn't take it anymore. She took the first bus to Abuja, her journal clutched tight like a weapon of memory. The city greeted her with noise and neon, but her heart only felt the quiet ache of betrayal. She found Daniel's office after hours. He was there, standing beside a tall woman with braided hair and a designer purse. The woman laughed, resting her hand on his arm like it belonged there. "Daniel?" Grace's voice cracked like thunder through the room. Daniel froze. His smile vanished instantly. "Grace. Don't grace me," she snapped, stepping forward. 2 months of silence, and this is why. The woman stepped back awkwardly, muttering something about coming back later. Daniel sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" Grace's eyes glistened. "Because from here, it looks exactly like what I feared." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Grace, I didn't mean to hurt you. Things got complicated. My firm's been struggling, and I met someone who—" "Stop," she said, voice shaking. "You met someone who what? Who what, Daniel? Helped you forget the woman who stood by you when you had nothing? The woman who stayed up nights editing your project proposals because she believed in you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked down, shame flooding his face. "You don't understand. I thought I was protecting you from my problems. I didn't want to drag you into the mess." Grace's tears fell, unrestrained now. "You didn't protect me, Daniel. You abandoned me." Grace returned to Lagos the next morning, her chest hollow. Days passed like years. She stopped writing. She stopped smiling. Her students noticed, whispering about how Auntie Grace doesn't tell stories anymore. Then, one Sunday evening, a delivery man showed up at her door. Inside was a letter, old-fashioned and written with care. "My dearest Grace, if you're reading this, it means I've run out of courage to speak in person. I made mistakes not of love, but of fear. I feared losing my career, my stability, and in trying to save myself, I lost you. I didn't fall out of love with you. I just fell into my own weakness. You taught me that love isn't about grand gestures, it's about honesty, about staying when it's hard. And I failed at that. If you can forgive me, even a little, I'll spend every word I speak trying to deserve it again. Daniel." Grace folded the letter slowly, her tears dropping onto the paper. Every line was a wound, but also a promise. Weeks later, Grace attended a teachers' conference in Abuja. Fate, or maybe forgiveness, led her steps toward Jabi Lake, the same place her heart had shattered. There he was, Daniel, standing by the bridge, looking older, tired, but still with that same gentle face she'd fallen for. He saw her. Their eyes met. Neither moved for a long time. Finally, Daniel spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Grace, I've been standing here every weekend, hoping you'd come." Her lips trembled. "Why?" "Because I still love you in every word," he said, smiling sadly. "Even the ones I never got to say." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Grace stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Then say them now," she whispered. And under the fading Abuja sunset, he did. Every apology, every regret, every word. And for the first time in months, Grace smiled again.